The champagne glasses clinked against each other as my brother-in-law finished his toast. "To Michael and Sarah," he said, raising his glass higher. 20 years and still going strong." Everyone laughed and cheered, the crystal chandeliers of Le Bernardin casting golden reflections across the faces of our closest family members. I smiled mechanically and took a sip, the expensive champagne tasting like nothing in my mouth. 20 years, 2 decades of building a life together, our brownstone in Brooklyn, our investment firm that had grown from a tiny office to a respected boutique agency, and of course our daughter Emily, now a freshman at Columbia. All the pieces of a perfect life arranged just so, like a museum display of the American dream. But museum displays are just for show, aren't they? I glanced at my wife across the table. Sarah looked stunning as always. At 45, she still turned heads when she walked into a room. Tonight she wore a black dress that hugged her figure, her blonde hair cascading just past her shoulders, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. Gifts from me on our 10th anniversary. She was laughing at something my sister had said, but I caught the subtle glance she cast toward her phone beside her plate. The third time in 20 minutes, our eyes met briefly and she flashed me that smile, the one that used to make my heart race, the one that now made something cold settle in my stomach. "Dad, you okay?" Emily leaned in, her brow furrowed slightly. "You look like you're a million miles away." I pulled myself back to the moment, squeezing my daughter's hand. "Just taking it all in, sweetheart. Not every day you hit 20 years. Emily beamed at me, so much like her mother in looks, but thankfully with more of my temperament. "Well, it's pretty amazing. You guys give me hope that not all marriages end up like half my friends' parents. If only she knew how close to the edge we were standing." "More wine, sir?" The waiter appeared at my elbow and I nodded, pushing away thoughts that had been haunting me for months. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. I'd play my part, as I always did. Sarah's laugh suddenly rang out, louder than necessary, slightly jarring against the refined atmosphere of the restaurant. Her sister Jessica raised an eyebrow slightly. She'd always been perceptive. Sarah's hand moved to her phone again, turning it over. "So, Michael," my father-in-law leaned across the table, "I hear the Wilson account finally came through. Your persistence paid off." I launched into business talk, grateful for the distraction. As I discussed market fluctuations and investment strategies, I maintained the perfect image of the successful businessman, devoted husband, and father. No one would suspect that beneath that polished exterior, I was calculating, observing, and planning. The Wilson account had indeed been a major win for our firm. 3 years of courting the tech mogul had finally resulted in him trusting us with a significant portion of his portfolio. It was the kind of victory Sarah and I would have once celebrated privately, in addition to the obligatory office champagne. Now she had merely nodded when I told her mind clearly elsewhere. "Excuse me." Sarah suddenly stood, clutching her purse and phone. "Ladies' room. Jess, want to come?" Her sister nodded and they both disappeared toward the back of the restaurant. I watched them go, noting how Sarah's head bent toward her phone the moment they rounded the corner. "She's planning something special for you, son," my mother-in-law said with a conspiratorial wink. "Been very secretive lately." I smiled tightly. Sarah's always full of surprises. She had no idea how right she was. Sarah was indeed full of surprises, like the surprise of finding receipts for hotel rooms on days she was supposedly at yoga, or the surprise of mysterious weekend conferences that appeared on no official industry calendars, or the most recent surprise, the burner phone I discovered hidden in the pocket of her gym bag 2 weeks ago. "Dad, can I have some champagne?" "Just a sip," Emily whispered, breaking into my thoughts. "Just one," I said, pushing my glass toward her. "Don't tell your mother." Emily took a small sip and wrinkled her nose. "People actually like this stuff?" "It's an acquired taste," I laughed, feeling a genuine moment of happiness with my daughter. Emily had always been my anchor, the one pure thing in my life. Whatever happened between Sarah and me, I would protect Emily at all costs. Sarah and Jessica returned, my wife's face slightly flushed. She sat down and immediately reached for her wine glass, draining half of it in one go. "Everything okay?" I asked pleasantly. "Perfect," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. Jessica was just telling me about her plans to renovate their vacation house. Jessica looked momentarily confused but recovered quickly. Yes, Tom has finally agreed to update that ancient kitchen. The dinner continued with more food, more wine, more carefully constructed conversation. To anyone watching, we were the perfect family celebrating a milestone. My in-laws, clearly a bit tipsy, reminisced about our wedding day. My brother shared embarrassing stories about my bachelor party. Everyone laughed at all the right moments. Through it all, I maintained my composure, playing the role of the contented husband while observing every detail of my wife's behavior. The slight tremor in her hand when her phone vibrated. The way her laughter seemed forced, too loud. The fact that she'd barely touched her food, Sarah, who normally had a healthy appetite. By the time the dessert arrived, a custom anniversary cake the restaurant had prepared, I'd counted 14 glances at her phone and 2 bathroom breaks that lasted just a bit too long. A toast, Sarah's father stood, raising his glass again. His face was flushed with alcohol and emotion. To my beautiful daughter and the man who has made her happy for 20 years. When you first came asking for her hand, Michael, I knew you were the one who would take care of her forever. I raised my glass, locking eyes with Sarah across the table. To taking care of each other, I said, my voice steady, in all the ways that matter. Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, perhaps even a flash of guilt, before she raised her own glass. To 20 years, she said softly. As we all drank, her phone lit up on the table. I caught a glimpse of the message before she snatched it up. Tonight, same place. 11. Sarah quickly turned the phone over, but it was too late. I'd seen it. She glanced at me nervously, but I gave no indication that anything was amiss. Instead, I turned to Emily and asked about her upcoming exams, the perfect image of a father interested in his daughter's education. Inside, however, something shifted. The last lingering doubt I'd harbored about my suspicions evaporated. In its place grew a cold, hard certainty. The check came, and I insisted on paying despite my father-in-law's protests. We said our goodbyes in front of the restaurant, with hugs and promises to get together again soon. Emily was heading back to her dorm. She had an early class the next day. I'm so proud of you two, she said, hugging us both. Seriously, 20 years is like forever in today's world. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the same brand she'd used since she was a little girl. We love you, Em. Call me tomorrow, okay? Will do, Dad. She kissed my cheek, then Sarah's, before getting into the Uber I'd called for her. As the car pulled away, Sarah turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That was lovely. Everyone seemed to have a good time. Yes, I agreed, flagging down our own car. A perfect evening. We rode home in silence, the kind that had become normal for us. Not the comfortable silence of a couple who know each other so well that words are unnecessary, but the heavy silence of people keeping secrets. Once inside our brownstone, Sarah immediately kicked off her heels and headed for the stairs. I'm exhausted. I think I'll turn in early. It's only 9:30, I observed, removing my tie slowly. She paused on the stairs, one hand on the railing. It's been a long day. All that socializing. Of course, I nodded. I think I'll stay up a bit. Maybe review some work documents. Relief flashed across her face. Don't stay up too late. She came back down a few steps and leaned in to kiss my cheek. The scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, her signature for years, filling my nostrils. Happy anniversary, Michael. Happy anniversary, Sarah. I watched her ascend the stairs, her posture perfect as always. Sarah had been a ballet dancer when we met, and though she'd given it up to focus on our business and family, she'd never lost that graceful carriage. It was one of the first things that had attracted me to her. That and her laugh, which used to be genuine. Once I heard the bedroom door close, I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey and sat in the darkness of our living room. The moon cast long shadows through the large windows, illuminating the photographs on the walls. Our wedding, Emily's birth, family vacations, moments of a shared life that now seemed like artifacts from someone else's existence. I sipped my drink slowly, checking my watch every few minutes. At 10:40, I heard the soft creak of the bedroom door opening. Sarah's footsteps were almost silent as she came down the stairs, but I knew every sound this house made. I remained perfectly still in the darkened corner of the room as she grabbed her coat from the closet, checked her appearance in the mirror by the door, and slipped out. Only when I heard the front door close did I move. I went to the window and watched as she walked briskly down the street, no longer looking tired at all. At the corner, a black Audi pulled up. She got in quickly, and the car drove away. I finished my whiskey in one burning gulp and picked up my phone. I pulled up a contact I hadn't used in years and typed a simple message. "It's happening. I need your help." The response came almost immediately. "I'm in. Tomorrow, order 800, usual place." I put the phone down and went upstairs to the guest bedroom. I hadn't slept in the same bed as Sarah for 3 weeks now, making excuses about insomnia and not wanting to disturb her. She hadn't protested much, which told me everything I needed to know. As I lay in the dark, I thought about the path that had led us here, the small changes I'd noticed over the past year, the gradual emotional distance, the new clothes, the sudden interest in fitness that had her out of the house at odd hours, the business trips that seemed unnecessary, all the classic signs that I, despite my intelligence and attention to detail, had initially dismissed. I wasn't angry anymore. That had come and gone months ago when I first began to suspect. Now I felt something colder and more focused. Sarah had made her choice. Now I would make mine. Morning came, and I was up early, dressed in casual clothes rather than my usual suit. Sarah was still asleep, or pretending to be, when I left. She'd returned home at 2:17 a.m. I'd been awake to hear her key in the lock, her shoes being removed carefully, her quiet ascent up the stairs. I drove to a small diner in Queens, a place I hadn't visited in years. It was the kind of establishment that existed in a different world from the upscale Manhattan restaurants and Brooklyn bistros that Sarah and I frequented. Formica tables, vinyl booths, the smell of bacon and coffee thick in the air. He was already there, occupying a booth in the back, a cup of coffee in front of him. Jason DeMarco hadn't changed much in the 15 years since we'd served together. Still built like a brick wall, head shaved close, eyes that missed nothing. He stood when he saw me, and we embraced briefly. "Michael, been too long, brother." "Thanks for coming, Jay." We sat, and a waitress appeared immediately. I ordered coffee and eggs, though I had no appetite. "So," Jason said once the waitress had gone, "your message wasn't exactly detailed, but I can guess. The wife?" I nodded, wrapping my hands around the chipped mug of coffee. 20 years, and this is where we are. Jason didn't offer platitudes or ask if I was sure. That wasn't his way. Instead, he asked, "What do you need from me?" "Information," I said. "I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Who he is, how long it's been going on, everything. You're planning something." It wasn't a question. "I'm protecting myself and my daughter. Sarah handles too much of our finances and has too many connections in our industry. If this ends badly, and it will, I need leverage." Jason nodded slowly. "Smart. Always were the strategic one." He pulled out a small notebook. "Give me everything you know so far." I laid it out for him. The patterns I'd noticed, the times and dates that didn't add up, the hotel receipts I'd found, the burner phone. I told him about the text message I'd seen last night and the black Audi. "You get the license plate?" "Only partial," I admitted. "But it's a start." "It's enough," Jason assured me. "This is what I do now, remember? Private investigation firm. Mostly corporate stuff, but the principles are the same." He made a few notes. "Timeline? As long as it takes to get concrete evidence, but I'd prefer sooner rather than later." "Understood." He tore out a page from his notebook and handed it to me. "Secure line. Call only from phones she doesn't have access to. No texts, no emails." I pocketed the number. "What's your fee?" Jason waved it away. "You saved my life in Fallujah. Consider this payback." "Jay, non-negotiable." His expression softened slightly. "Look, whatever's happening, you deserve to know the truth. And if she's screwing you over, you deserve to come out of this standing." I nodded, grateful. As we finished our breakfast, we talked about lighter things. Jason's 2 boys who were now in high school, my daughter's college adventures, mutual acquaintances from our Army days. It felt good to talk to someone who knew me from before, someone who had seen me at my worst and my best. Before we parted, Jason put a hand on my shoulder. "Watch yourself, Michael. When people get desperate, they get dangerous." I can handle Sarah. It's not just her I'm worried about. You've got that look. What look? The one you had before we went into that building in Ramadi. Like you're ready to burn the world down. He squeezed my shoulder. Just remember you've got a daughter who needs you in one piece. I know this isn't about revenge, Jay. It's about survival. He nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. I'll be in touch within a few days. Sooner if I find something significant. As I drove back to Brooklyn, I thought about Jason's warning. Was I becoming obsessed? Perhaps. But this wasn't some irrational jealousy or wounded pride driving me. This was about protecting 20 years of work, about ensuring my daughter's future, about not being played for a fool by the woman I had trusted most in the world. Sarah was up when I returned, sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee and her laptop open. She looked up with a practiced smile. Early meeting? Breakfast with an old friend, I replied, pouring myself more coffee. Jason DeMarco is in town. A slight furrow appeared between her brows. From the army? I didn't know you two still kept in touch. We don't really. He reached out last week, and with the anniversary dinner last night, it seemed like a good time to catch up. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. I was thinking we should talk about a vacation, maybe for our anniversary. I know it's a bit late, but with everyone's schedules. Where did you have in mind? I asked, leaning against the counter. I was thinking Bali, or maybe the Maldives. She turned her laptop toward me, showing a website with pristine beaches and luxurious overwater bungalows. We could use some time away, just the two of us. I studied her face, wondering if she actually believed we could repair whatever was left of our marriage with a tropical vacation. Or perhaps she just wanted access to my undivided attention to maintain her deception. Either way, the suggestion was almost laughable. Looks nice, I said noncommittally. Let me check my schedule for the next few months. Great, she beamed, an actress hitting her mark perfectly. I was thinking 2 weeks. We deserve it after 20 years. We certainly deserve what's coming to us, I agreed, the double meaning lost on her. I have to head to the office for a bit. The Wilson paperwork needs finalizing. On a Saturday? She frowned slightly. The market doesn't care about weekends. I'll be back for dinner. I didn't go to the office. Instead, I drove to a small electronics store in a nondescript strip mall in New Jersey. The owner, a former client with a talent for technological solutions that existed in legal gray areas, set me up with everything I needed. Small cameras with motion sensors, audio recording devices, and software to track activity on our home computers and Wi-Fi network. This is some serious surveillance equipment, he commented as he rang up my purchases. Everything okay, Mr. Preston? Just upgrading my home security, I replied smoothly. Can't be too careful these days. He didn't believe me. I could tell by the knowing look in his eyes. But he didn't press the issue. The cameras upload directly to a secure cloud server. Only you have the password. And they're small enough that unless someone's specifically looking for them, they won't be noticed. I spent the afternoon installing the devices while Sarah was at her yoga class. Cameras in the living room, hallway, and our home office. Audio recorders in strategic locations. Spyware on her laptop that would forward all her emails and messages to a secure account I'd created. It wasn't just about catching her in the act. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. If she was planning to leave me, I needed to know if she was also planning to take me for everything I was worth. Our business, our savings, our home, all of it could be at risk if she had been planning this for a while. As I worked, I reflected on our marriage, trying to pinpoint when things had changed. Had she ever really loved me? Had I ever really known her? 20 years is a long time to live with someone and still be capable of being blindsided by their betrayal. Sarah returned late in the afternoon, her face flushed from exercise, her hair slightly damp from a shower she'd presumably taken at the gym. She seemed surprised to find me home. I thought you were at the office, she said, setting down her gym bag. Finished earlier than expected. I was sitting on the couch reading a financial journal, the picture of relaxed domesticity. How was yoga? Good. Intense. She ran a hand through her hair. I'm getting better at the headstand. Impressive, I said, turning a page. You've been very dedicated to it lately. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. It helps with stress and keeps me in shape. You look great, I said, finally looking up at her. Whatever you're doing, it's working. She smiled, seemingly pleased with the compliment. Thanks. I'm going to shower again and change. Do you want to go out for dinner? Or we could order in. Let's order in. I've had enough of restaurants after last night. Perfect. Thai? Sure. As she went upstairs, I heard her phone ping with a message. Her pace quickened slightly. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal normality. We ate Thai food on the couch while watching a movie neither of us was really interested in. We made small talk about Emily, about work, about the weather. Like actors performing a scene they'd rehearsed too many times, going through the motions without feeling. At one point, Sarah got up to use the bathroom and took her phone with her. Another tell. When she returned, she sat closer to me on the couch, even leaned her head against my shoulder briefly. I wondered if she felt guilty, or if this was just part of her cover. Either way, I didn't pull away. I would play my role perfectly until I had everything I needed. Days passed, then weeks. Jason provided regular updates. The man in the Audi was Eric Donovan, a real estate developer from Manhattan. 48 years old, divorced twice, no children. He and Sarah had been meeting regularly for at least 6 months, based on hotel records and credit card receipts that Jason had managed to obtain through methods I didn't ask about. The cameras and recorders in our home had captured Sarah in multiple phone conversations with Eric, always when she thought I wasn't home or was asleep. I watched the footage with a detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a specimen. The woman on the screen, whispering intimacies to another man in the home we'd built together, seemed like a stranger to me. But it wasn't until a Tuesday afternoon in late October that I discovered just how far Sarah was willing to go. I was working from home that day, something I rarely did. Sarah had a client meeting and wasn't expected back until evening. I was in our home office when I heard the front door open. Checking the security feed on my phone, I saw Sarah enter, looking around furtively. She hadn't expected me to be home. I stayed perfectly still in the office, door closed as she moved through the house. Through the camera feed, I watched her go to our bedroom, then to the ensuite bathroom. She opened the medicine cabinet and removed something from her purse, a small prescription bottle. She emptied several pills into her hand, then reached for a container on the shelf. My sleep aid tablets that I occasionally used for insomnia. With methodical precision, she replaced several of my tablets with the pills from her bottle, then carefully arranged everything to look untouched. She returned the prescription bottle to her purse and left the bathroom. I felt a cold wave of shock wash over me. This went beyond infidelity. This was something far more sinister. I waited until she left the house, then went to the bathroom to examine what she'd done. The pills she'd substituted looked similar to my sleep aids but were not identical. I carefully removed them and placed them in a small evidence bag I'd gotten from Jason. That evening, I took the pills to a pharmacist friend who owed me a favor. He examined them discreetly and called me an hour later. "Michael, these are prescription-strength benzodiazepines," he said, his voice concerned. "Much stronger than over-the-counter sleep aids. Where did you get these?" "Just checking something for a client," I lied smoothly. What would happen if someone took them unknowingly? They'd be extremely sedated, possibly to the point of being unable to wake up for hours. Definitely shouldn't drive or operate machinery. Combined with alcohol, they could be dangerous. He paused. "Michael, if someone is giving these to people without their knowledge, that's a serious crime." "I understand. Thanks for the information." I hung up, a new understanding crystallizing in my mind. Sarah wasn't just cheating. She was drugging me, or planning to. For what purpose? To ensure I wouldn't wake up during her late-night rendezvous? Or something worse? The next day I met with Jason and showed him the pills. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, examining the evidence bag. "This is beyond an affair, Michael. This is premeditated harm." "I know." My voice was calm, despite the storm raging inside me. "I need to accelerate our timeline. I want everything you've got, and I want to move before she tries something else." Jason nodded grimly. "I'll have the full report to you by tomorrow. But Michael, with this," he held up the bag of pills, "you could go to the police." "No police," I said firmly. "No public scandal. I don't want Emily to see her mother led away in handcuffs, no matter what Sarah's done. I have a different approach in mind. Your call, but be careful. This woman is clearly not who you thought she was." That night, I pretended to take my usual sleep aid before bed, actually palming the pill and disposing of it later. I lay in the guest bedroom, fully awake, listening to Sarah moving around the house. She checked on me around midnight, opening the door quietly and watching me for a moment. I regulated my breathing, feigning deep sleep. Apparently satisfied, she closed the door and left. I heard the front door open and close softly. Rising from bed, I went to the window and watched as she walked down the street to where the now familiar black Audi waited. But instead of getting in immediately, she leaned in through the window and spoke to Eric. After a moment, she gestured toward our house, and they both looked up at it. A chill ran down my spine. Were they discussing me? Planning something together? The thought that this man might have been in my home, might have been part of whatever Sarah was planning, filled me with a cold rage I hadn't felt since my combat days. But I couldn't act on emotion. This had to be strategic, methodical. I returned to bed not to sleep, but to plan. Jason's final report arrived the next day. Comprehensive, damning evidence of Sarah's affair, complete with photographs, hotel receipts, phone records, and transcripts of conversations recorded in our home. But the most disturbing element was what he'd discovered about Eric Donovan. The man wasn't just a real estate developer. He had a history of targeting wealthy married women, becoming involved with them, and somehow ending up with substantial financial gains when their marriages dissolved. Two of his previous girlfriends had been the wives of successful businessmen who had suddenly died, one in a car accident, another from an apparent heart attack. This guy is bad news, Jason had written in his notes. Possible con man at best, something much worse at worst. The timing of those deaths is too convenient. Everything suddenly made terrifying sense. The pills, Sarah's suggestion of a remote vacation, her increasing interest in our company's finances. This wasn't just an affair, it was potentially something much more dangerous. I spent the day finalizing my plan. First, I transferred half of our liquid assets to new accounts in my name only. Not everything, as that might alert Sarah, but enough to protect myself and Emily. I updated my will, removing Sarah as beneficiary and ensuring everything would go to our daughter. I gathered copies of all the evidence Jason had collected and stored them in multiple secure locations. Then I arranged for a family dinner the following evening, supposedly to celebrate Emily's successful midterm exams, but actually to serve as the stage for the final act of this tragedy. I invited Sarah's parents, her sister Jessica, and her husband, my own sister and her family, and of course, Emily. Sarah seemed pleased with the idea, unaware of what I had planned. Should we do it at Le Bernardin again? She asked. Everyone enjoyed it last time. I was thinking something more intimate, I replied. Let's have it here at home. I'll have it catered. She agreed readily, perhaps thinking our home would be safer ground for her deception. I spent the next day arranging everything, the food, the drinks, and most importantly, the presentation I had prepared. The evening arrived and our home filled with family. Emily was radiant, excited about her excellent grades and the research project she'd been assigned. Sarah played the perfect hostess, moving among our guests with practiced charm. I watched her from across the room, wondering if this stranger had always been hiding beneath the surface of the woman I'd married. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, I stood and raised my glass. I'd like to make a toast, I announced, not just to Emily's academic success, which makes us incredibly proud, but to family. I looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. Family is about trust, about having each other's backs, about honesty. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. In fact, I continued, I've prepared a short presentation about the importance of honesty in relationships. I picked up a remote control from the side table. If you'll all direct your attention to the TV. Before Sarah could react, I pressed play. The large screen on our living room wall came to life, displaying the first of many images. Sarah and Eric entering a hotel, date and time stamped. Her face drained of color as I advanced through the slides methodically, showing more photos, receipts, transcripts of her conversations. The room fell deathly silent. Emily's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Sarah's parents stared in disbelief. Jessica looked from her sister to me, comprehension dawning in her eyes. Michael, Sarah finally found her voice, standing up shakily. This isn't... You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I replied calmly, advancing to the next slide. a close-up image of the pills she had tried to substitute for my sleep aids. I understand that you've been planning this for months. I understand that your boyfriend Eric has a history of becoming involved with wealthy married women who subsequently lose their husbands under suspicious circumstances. Gasps echoed around the room. Sarah's mother let out a small cry. That's ridiculous. Sarah's voice rose, a note of panic creeping in. You're making things up because you're jealous. Am I? I advanced to the final slide, a chemical analysis of the pills she'd planted. These are strong sedatives, Sarah. The same kind found in the system of Eric's previous girlfriend's husband before he drove off a cliff. Were you planning our vacation to Bali for the same purpose? This is insane, she hissed, looking around the room desperately. He's lying. He's always been controlling, jealous. Sarah, her father's voice cut through her protests, heavy with disappointment. Is this true? Have you been… He couldn't finish the sentence, gesturing helplessly at the evidence still displayed on the screen. Dad, of course not. Michael's twisting everything. Stop it, Mom. Emily's voice was quiet but firm. She stood, tears streaming down her face. Just stop lying. I can see the truth right there. She pointed at the screen, then turned to me. Dad, did you know all this time? I suspected for months, I admitted. I confirmed it recently. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Em, but I thought it was important that everyone understand exactly what's been happening. Sarah looked around the room, seeing the shock and judgment on every face. Something in her seemed to snap. Her desperate denials gave way to cold fury. Fine, she said, her voice eerily calm. Yes, I've been seeing Eric, because Michael stopped seeing me years ago. He's been buried in work, emotionally unavailable. So you decided to drug him and possibly harm him? Jessica interrupted, her voice incredulous. Sarah, listen to yourself. You don't understand what it's like, Sarah continued, addressing the room rather than any individual. 20 years of playing the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect business partner, always in Michael's shadow. Eric appreciates me, values me. Enough, I cut her off, my voice steady. This isn't about your affair. It's about what you were planning to do. I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope. These are divorce papers. My lawyer has already filed them. You'll find the terms are fair, half of our assets, as agreed in our prenuptial agreement. But you will have no further involvement in the company, and I'm requesting full custody of Emily, though she's old enough to make her own decisions now. I placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. Sarah stared at it, then at me, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. You think you've won, she said, her voice low. You think you've got it all figured out, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do. That's why I've taken precautions. I gestured around the room. Everything that's happened here tonight has been recorded. If anything happens to me, anything at all, this evidence goes directly to the police, along with the pills you tried to give me and their chemical analysis. Sarah's face went pale again. She looked cornered, dangerous. Emily stepped forward, placing herself between us. Mom, I think you should go. Now. Sarah looked at our daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Emily, sweetie, you don't understand. I understand enough. Emily's voice broke. Please just go. Sarah's gaze darted around the room, finding no allies. Even her parents were looking at her with a mixture of shock and disappointment. Finally, she grabbed her purse from the couch. This isn't over, Michael, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You'll regret this. No, Sarah, I replied calmly. The only thing I regret is not seeing you for who you really are years ago. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily collapsed into tears, and I held her as she sobbed. The others moved around us awkwardly, unsure what to do or say in the face of such a dramatic implosion. I'm so sorry, Sarah's father finally said, his voice heavy with shame. We had no idea. None of us did, I assured him. Sarah was very careful. The evening ended somberly. As our family members left, they offered awkward condolences and support. Emily decided to stay the night rather than return to her dorm, too shaken by the evening's revelations to be alone. After everyone had gone and Emily had finally fallen asleep in her old bedroom, I sat alone in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey in hand. The house felt different now, emptier but somehow cleaner, as if a festering wound had finally been lanced. My phone rang. Jason. "It's done?" he asked without preamble. "It's done," I confirmed. "She knows it's over." "Be careful for the next few days," he warned. "This type of exposure can make people desperate." "I've taken precautions." "Good, and Michael," he hesitated. "I know this isn't easy, but you did what you had to do." After we hung up, I sat in the stillness of my home, feeling the weight of 20 years collapsing around me. There was pain, yes, but also a strange sense of liberation. The truth, however ugly, was finally out in the open. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, changing locks, and comforting Emily, who alternated between anger at her mother and grief for the family she thought she had. Sarah made no attempt to contact either of us directly, communicating only through her lawyer. A week after the confrontation, Jason called with news. "Eric Donovan skipped town," he said, "cleaned out his accounts and headed west. Word is he's in California now." "He abandoned her," I said, feeling a grim satisfaction. "Of course he did. She's no use to him now that the plan failed." "There's more," Jason continued. "Sarah tried to access your joint accounts yesterday. All of them. She would have found most of them already secured," I noted. "Did she try the offshore accounts as well?" "Yes. She's getting desperate, Michael. Running out of resources and options." That evening, as I was working in the home office, my phone rang with Sarah's number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Hello, Sarah." "You've ruined everything," she said without preamble. Her voice was slurred slightly. She'd been drinking. "Are you happy now?" "This isn't about happiness," I replied calmly. "It's about consequences." "Consequences?" She laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what that word means. You've taken everything from me, my home, my family, my money. Our home, our family, our money," I corrected her. "And you were planning to take it all from me, possibly along with my life. The difference is, I did it legally." "Eric's gone," she said after a pause, her voice smaller. "He left. Wouldn't even take my calls." "I'm not surprised. Men like that don't stick around when things get difficult." "I loved him," she whispered. "I really did." "Did you ever love me, Sarah? Or was I always just a means to an end?" She was silent for so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally, she said, "I did. Once. A long time ago." "What changed?" Another long pause. "You became predictable. Safe. I needed more." "So you found it with a man who might have been planning to kill me?" "I didn't know about those other women," she protested weakly. "I didn't know that's what he wanted." "But you knew about the pills," I pressed. "You knew what you were doing there." She didn't deny it. "I just wanted you out of the way for a while, so I could think, plan my exit. With half my assets and company shares," I finished for her. "It would have been cleaner than this," she said, an edge returning to her voice. "Now look at us. You've won, Michael. You've got everything, and I'm left with nothing. Not nothing. You'll have what you're legally entitled to. No more, no less." She was quiet again, then said, "You think you're so much better than me? So moral, so righteous. But you're empty inside, Michael. You always have been. Without me, you're nothing." "Goodbye, Sarah," I said, refusing to engage with her attempt to wound me. "Don't call again unless it's through your lawyer." I hung up, her final words echoing in my mind. Was she right? Was I empty without her? I looked around the office, at the life we'd built together, now fractured beyond repair. No, I decided, I wasn't empty. I had Emily. I had my integrity. I had the truth. That was more than enough to rebuild a life on. 3 months passed. The divorce proceedings moved forward, slower than I would have liked, but steadily. Emily had returned to her studies after the initial shock wore off, though she still refused to speak to her mother. Sarah had moved into a small apartment in Manhattan, living on the advance her lawyer had secured from our eventual asset division. I threw myself into work, into rebuilding my life as a single man. The company continued to thrive, and I found a rhythm to my days that felt, if not happy, then at least stable. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Emily came to visit. She'd been doing better lately, finding her way through the aftermath of our family's collapse with the resilience of youth. We decided to spend the day together. just the two of us. Let's look at some old photos, she suggested as we finished a late breakfast. I need some for this project I'm doing on family narratives. I retrieved several albums from the bookshelf, and we sat side by side on the couch, flipping through pages of memories. Emily as a toddler at the beach, family Christmases, Sarah and me in the early days, young and seemingly in love. You guys really looked happy here, Emily said, pointing to a photo from a ski trip when she was about 8. We were, I think, I replied honestly. At least I was. Do you ever wonder if Mom was always like that, or if something changed her? I considered the question carefully. I think people rarely change completely. They just reveal different parts of themselves over time. Emily nodded thoughtfully. I've been trying to understand it, not to excuse what she did, but just to make sense of it. That's more generosity than she deserves, I said, but without bitterness. But it speaks well of you that you're trying. We continued through the albums, finding moments to laugh about, stories to share. It felt good to remember that our family had once contained genuine happiness, despite how it had ended. I had opened my laptop to check some emails while Emily continued browsing the photos. A news alert popped up on my screen, a local New York story. Oh my God, I heard Emily gasp next to me. The headline read, "Woman jumps from Hudson River Bridge. Body recovered." I quickly scanned the article. A woman in her mid-40s had been seen jumping from the bridge the previous evening. A witness reported she had been standing alone for some time, holding what appeared to be a wine glass, before climbing onto the railing and jumping. Police had recovered her body downstream early this morning. There was no name given yet, pending notification of family, but a description matched Sarah. Blonde hair, wearing an expensive black dress. Dad, do you think... Emily's voice trembled. I closed the laptop gently. Let's not jump to conclusions. It could be anyone. But we both knew. Something in the details, the wine glass especially, felt too specific to be coincidence. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Jessica. Michael, her voice was thick with emotion. The police just called my parents. It's Sarah. She jumped from the bridge last night. Even though I'd suspected it from the news article, hearing it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. Not because I still loved her, but because despite everything, she was Emily's mother and had once been my wife. I'm so sorry, Jessica. Emily's with me now. We just saw something on the news. They need someone to identify her, Jessica said, her voice breaking. My father can't do it. I was wondering, I'll go, I said immediately. You stay with your parents. I'll handle this. After I hung up, I turned to Emily, who was sitting very still, her face pale. Was that about Mom? She asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. Yes, I said simply. I need to go to the police station. I want to come with you. Em, you don't need to do that. This isn't something... She was my mother, Emily said firmly, though tears were forming in her eyes. I need to be there. I wanted to protect her from this final trauma, but I recognized the determination in her face, the same expression I saw in the mirror when I had decided to confront Sarah's betrayal. So I nodded and we left together. The process at the police station was mercifully brief, but unbearably painful. Emily insisted on coming into the room with me. The detective was gentle, explaining that personal effects had been found at the scene, a purse containing Sarah's ID, and most tellingly, a crystal wine glass that matched the set from our anniversary dinner at Le Bernardin. She took it that night, Emily whispered. I remember her putting something in her purse when she thought no one was looking. The body itself was covered, with only the face visible for identification. Sarah looked peaceful in a way she hadn't in life for a long time. I confirmed her identity, and Emily stood strong beside me, holding my hand tightly. In the car afterward, Emily finally broke down. I was so angry at her. The last thing I said was for her to leave, to just go. This isn't your fault, I said firmly, pulling over so I could hold her properly. Your mother made her choices, all of them, from the affair to the end. None of that is on you. But if I had talked to her, maybe... Emily, listen to me. What your mother did, the affair, the pills, all of it, those were her decisions. And this final act was also her choice, a selfish choice that leaves pain for everyone else to deal with. We sat there for a long time, my daughter crying in my arms as I tried to find words that could make sense of something so senseless. Later that evening, after Emily had fallen asleep in her old room, I sat alone in the living room. On the coffee table was the wine glasses twin. I had taken the whole set home after the anniversary dinner. I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey and tried to process the finality of what had happened. Sarah was gone. The woman I had married, had a child with, built a life with, and then discovered I never really knew, had chosen to end her story rather than face the consequences of her actions. Had she truly loved Eric so much that losing him broke her? Or was it the loss of status, money, and reputation that she couldn't bear? I would never know, and strangely, I found I didn't need to know anymore. The next day, Emily and I went for a long walk in Central Park. The autumn leaves were at their peak, a riot of red and gold against the blue sky. "What happens now?" Emily asked as we sat on a bench overlooking the lake. "We go on," I said simply, "day by day." Does it make me a terrible person that I'm still angry at her, even now? No, it makes you human. Anger, grief, confusion. They can all exist together. There's no right way to feel about this. Emily nodded, looking out at the water. "I found some photos I want to frame for my dorm room. Happy ones from when I was little." "That sounds like a good idea." "Not to pretend everything was perfect," she clarified, "but to remember that there were good times too. That has to count for something, right?" "It does," I assured her, putting my arm around her shoulders. The good was real, even if it didn't last. We walked back to the brownstone as the afternoon light began to fade. Emily went upstairs to collect the photos she wanted, while I opened my laptop to check my emails. Another news notification appeared. The full story about Sarah had been released. I clicked on it, reading the sparse details of her final hours. Witnesses had seen her standing alone by the river for nearly an hour, holding the wine glass, occasionally raising it as if in a toast. Then, without warning, she had climbed onto the railing and jumped. The article mentioned she was recently divorced, though our divorce hadn't actually been finalized, and had been experiencing financial difficulties. I closed the article and opened my email, focusing on work matters. Emily came back downstairs with a handful of photographs in a small box. "I found Mom's old ballet shoes," she said, showing me the worn satin point shoes. "I think I want to keep these." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you want to keep, it's yours." We spent the evening ordering in Chinese food and watching old movies we used to enjoy as a family. Not to pretend nothing had happened, but as Emily had said, to acknowledge that the good parts had been real too. As Emily was preparing to return to her dorm the next morning, she hugged me tightly. "We're going to be okay, right, Dad?" "We are," I said with complete conviction. "Different, but okay." After she left, I sat in the quiet house, feeling a strange sense of peace settling over me. Sarah's final act had been as selfish as her betrayal, leaving others to deal with the aftermath of her choices. But it had also closed a chapter that might otherwise have dragged on painfully for years.